Greetings and welcome once more to the Haunting Hour channel. Please like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel before viewing. Enjoy your time while viewing. Childhood memories aren't always sunshine and scraped knees. Some burrow deeper, leaving icy tendrils clinging to your psyche long after the event. Mine started with a knock. I was 8 years old, tucked away in my cozy bunk bed, a warm copy of Treasure Island, clutched in sweaty palms. A single sharp rap against the wood of my door shattered the tranquility of the pirate adventure. "Who is it?" I called out, more to myself than to the unseen visitor. Silence answered, thick and oppressive. Tentatively, I peeked over the edge of the bunk. The hallway was a stark expanse of shadows, illuminated only by the faint glow from the living room. Another knock, firmer this time, sent shivers skittering down my spine. "Mommy," I ventured, voice cracking slightly. "Honey, I'm downstairs," came my mother's voice, muffled by distance. It must be the wind. Wind? In a closed house? Doubt gnawed at my insides, but the comfort of my mother's words settled the worst of my fear. I burrowed deeper under the covers, the rhythmic squeak of my rocking chair the only sound for a while. Then, just as I began to drift off, a whisper. "Let me in," it rasped, barely audible over the creak of the chair. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the voice to go away, but it persisted, a low, mournful plea that sent goosebumps erupting across my skin. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I clambered out of bed and tiptoed towards the door. Placing my ear against the cool wood, I listened intently. Silence. Tentatively, I reached for the doorknob. My hand hovered, the brass cold against my clammy skin. What if it wasn't the wind? What if there really was someone, or something, on the other side? Suddenly, the knob rattled violently, as if someone was trying to force their way in. A scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. "Sarah, what's wrong?" My mother burst into the room, concern itched on her face. Tears streamed down my face as I pointed at the door, the knob still rattling faintly. There was a voice, I stammered, voice thick with terror. Someone wanted to come in. My mother knelt before me, her brow furrowed in worry. "It's okay, sweetie. It must have been the wind again. Doors do crazy things sometimes." She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, but the doubt in her eyes did little to quell the rising tide of fear within me. She tucked me back into bed, lingering for a moment longer than usual. The rest of the night was filled with fitful sleep, punctuated by the occasional creak of the floorboards and my own anxious imagination. The memory, however, remained, a seed of unease that would only germinate as the years went by. The rhythmic clatter of the train lulled me into a restless sleep. Years had passed since the unsettling episode in my childhood bedroom, yet the memory still held a strange power over me. The knocks, the whispers, they hadn't stopped. They'd become an unwelcome companion, a presence that haunted the periphery of my life. My tiny studio apartment offered little comfort. The thin walls seemed to amplify every creak and groan of the aging building. There'd been nights when the knocking would come from the bathroom door, rattling the worn lock with a chilling insistence. Other times it would be from the closet, a hollow thump that echoed in the stillness like a skeletal fist. I learned to cope. A white noise machine became my constant companion, its low hum a shield against the unwanted voices. During the day, the city's cacophony masked the whispers, but the quiet nights were always the hardest. Tonight, however, was different. The rhythmic tapping started subtly, barely audible over the drone of the train rattling past my window. But with each passing minute, it grew bolder, a relentless tattoo against my thin door. Sweat prickled my skin, despite the cool air conditioning. I forced myself to breathe, reminding myself it was probably just a loose pipe or a restless neighbor. Yet the voice that followed the knocking shattered that fragile illusion. "Let me in," it rasped, the words slurred together in a desperate plea. It was the same voice from my childhood, laced with an urgency that sent chills down my spine. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I scrambled for my phone, the familiar glow a small comfort in the growing darkness. Maybe a quick internet search would offer some rational explanation, a scientific phenomenon to explain the inexplicable. Just then, the voice spoke again, closer this time, a guttural moan that seemed to emanate from right behind the door. My breath hitched in my throat, and I fumbled with the phone, dropping it with a clatter. Panic clawed at my throat. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair with a crash. The sound seemed to ignite the entity on the other side. The knocking became a frantic pounding, the voice morphing into a series of desperate screams. "Help me! Please, let me in!" Tears streamed down my face as I scrambled for the doorknob, my hands shaking violently. Reason urged me to open the door, to confront whatever lurked on the other side. But a deeper, more primal fear held me back. What if opening the door unleashed something worse? Finally, unable to bear the cacophony any longer, I threw my weight against the door, pressing my back against the cool wood. The pounding continued, relentless and terrifying. "Sarah," a concerned voice called out from the hallway. It was my neighbor, Emily, her voice laced with alarm. "Emily," I cried out, relief flooding through me. Her presence, however fleeting, offered a lifeline in the storm of fear. It's my door. Someone's trying to get in." The pounding stopped as abruptly as it began. A tense silence followed, broken only by my ragged breaths. "Are you sure?" Emily's voice sounded hesitant. I didn't hear anything. I wanted to believe her, to check it up to a stress-induced hallucination. But the memory of the voice, so vivid and raw, sent a fresh wave of terror washing over me. I don't know," I stammered, voice hoarse. Emily placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Why don't I call maintenance? Maybe there's something loose with the lock." Her suggestion offered a sliver of hope. Maybe it wasn't a malevolent presence after all. Maybe it was just a faulty lock playing tricks on my overactive imagination. As Emily called maintenance, I sank to the floor, the weight of the experience pressing down on me. The knocks might have stopped for now, but the chilling feeling of being watched, of being hunted, lingered in the air, a suffocating presence that promised more sleepless nights to come. The repairman, a gruff man named Hank with a perpetually grease-stained baseball cap, examined the lock with a practiced eye. "Looks fine to me," he announced after a cursory inspection. "Probably just the wind rattling the doorknob again." His words offered little comfort. The vivid memory of the desperate voice, the sheer terror of the experience, was etched into my mind. "But, are you sure?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Hank chuckled, a sound that echoed harshly in the cramped apartment. "Lady, these old buildings creak and groan more than a haunted house on Halloween. You get used to it." He patted the door reassuringly. "Solid as a rock. You got nothing to worry about." His confidence was infectious, momentarily pushing aside the tendrils of fear. Maybe Emily and Hank were right. Maybe it was just the quirks of an old building. Determined to reclaim a sense of normalcy, I thanked Hank and settled back into a semblance of routine. The white noise machine became a comforting lullaby, its static hum a barrier against the unwanted voices. For a while, The peace held. The nights were quiet. The creaky floorboards no longer seemed menacing. I even began sleeping through the night, a luxury I hadn't known I craved. Then, one rainy afternoon, it started again. A light tapping, almost playful at first, against the wall behind my bed. I dismissed it as another quirk of the building, the settling of pipes perhaps, but the tapping persisted, growing more insistent with each passing minute. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I stared at the wall, willing the sound to stop. Just as I was about to convince myself it was just my imagination, a new sound joined the symphony of unsettling noises, a low, mournful whine that seemed to emanate from the floorboards beneath my feet. Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't the wind or a loose pipe. This was deliberate, a calculated assault on my sanity. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The tapping escalated into a frantic pounding, accompanied by the guttural whine that vibrated through the room. I stumbled towards the door, a desperate need to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Just then, the sound stopped abruptly. A chilling silence descended, broken only by the drumming of rain against the window panes. Trembling, I peeked through the hallway door. The corridor was empty, bathed in an eerie twilight. "Sarah, you all right?" Emily's voice came from down the hall. Relief washed over me at the sound of her familiar voice. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "I heard some noise coming from your apartment," she said, her brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" "Just the storm, I guess," I mumbled, my voice strained. Emily seemed unconvinced, but she didn't press the issue. "Well, if you need anything, don't hesitate to knock," she said with a wink. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very act that had triggered the terrifying experience was now my only lifeline to the outside world. Despite the discomfort, I knew I couldn't live like this, constantly on edge, a prisoner in my own apartment. As the rain subsided and the city lights flickered back to life, a grim determination settled over me. This wasn't just about a faulty lock or overactive nerves anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, about silencing the voices that haunted me. The source of the knocking, whatever it was, wouldn't be ignored any longer. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. The once comforting static of the white noise machine now felt like a taunting reminder of my fractured reality. The playful taps had morphed into a relentless pounding, a constant drumbeat against my sanity. Desperate for answers, I started scouring the internet, plunging down rabbit holes of unexplained phenomena and urban legends. Most of the online discussions devolved into arguments about sleep paralysis and overactive imaginations, offering little solace. But then, tucked away in a dusty corner of the web, I stumbled upon a local forum dedicated to the city's oddities and historical mysteries. One particular thread caught my eye: the haunting of Elmwood Apartments. Elmwood Apartments. It was the name of my building. With a racing heart, I devoured the thread, a chilling mix of personal accounts and historical snippets. Apparently, the building had a dark past, rumored to be the site of a tragic fire that claimed several lives decades ago. One particular post sent a jolt of fear through me. "Ever hear knocking on your walls at night? Like someone's trapped?" My grandma used to say it was the restless spirits of the fire victims, forever searching for a way out. The post mirrored my experiences with an unsettling accuracy. Suddenly, the playful taps and guttural whines weren't random occurrences. They were a message, a desperate plea from beyond the veil. Buoyed by the knowledge that I wasn't alone, I decided to reach out to the forum user who posted the message. Their username was Oldtimer, and their profile picture displayed a faded black and white photograph of a young woman with a haunted look in her eyes. With trembling fingers, I typed out a message, detailing my experiences and referencing the fire. Minutes turned into hours, and just as I was about to resign myself to silence, a notification popped up. "They are restless souls." The message read, the text cryptic and chilling. "Don't let them in. They won't leave." The message offered little comfort, but it confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't a haunting in the traditional sense. It was a desperate struggle, a battle for the threshold between two worlds. The next day, I ventured to the local library, determined to unearth the truth about the fire. Sifting through dusty microfilm archives, I finally found it, a news article about the Elmwood tragedy. The fire had been contained quickly, but not before claiming 3 lives, a young couple and their infant child. The news report mentioned the couple's names, Thomas and Amelia Wright, and a chilling detail: their apartment at the time of the fire was the very one I now occupied. A new wave of terror washed over me. The voices, please, it wasn't just random spirits. It was the Wrights, forever trapped in their fiery demise, their desperate cries for escape echoing through the very walls of the apartment. The knowledge fueled a grim determination within me. I wouldn't be a prisoner in my own home any longer. I would find a way to appease the Wrights, to help them find peace, even if it meant confronting the very thing that terrified me most. The library's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the stacks of books surrounding me. Yet the chill that crept down my spine had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Armed with the knowledge gleaned from the newspaper articles, a fresh wave of terror and a strange sense of obligation settled over me. These weren't just disembodied voices anymore. They were the desperate pleas of a trapped family. A family I now shared a home with, albeit unwillingly. The pounding had become a constant barrage, a relentless tattoo against the walls and the door. It felt like a desperate attempt to break through, to force their way into the world of the living. The old-timer hadn't offered any solutions in their cryptic message. Was there a ritual I could perform? An offering I could make? The internet searches offered a smorgasbord of questionable advice, ranging from burning sage, which my smoke detector wouldn't appreciate, to reciting obscure prayers from various religions. Frustrated and desperate, I decided to seek out the library's resident historian, a kindly old woman named Ms. Henderson. She was known for her deep well of knowledge about the city's history, both official and whispered about. With a pounding heart, I approached her desk, clutching the grainy photocopied newspaper articles. Miss Henderson peered at the faded headlines through her thick spectacles, a frown creasing her brow. "Elmwood Apartments," she muttered, her voice laced with a hint of recognition. "Yes, there was a tragedy there a long time ago. A young family." I explained my experiences, the relentless knocking, the pleas for help. Miss Henderson listened intently, her expression thoughtful. Once I finished, a long silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant tick of a grandfather clock. "There are unofficial accounts," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stories passed down from generation to generation. They say the fire was more than an accident. They say a door was left ajar, an invitation for something else to enter." My heart hammered against my ribs. An open door. Could that be the key to the Wrights' torment, the reason they were trapped, unable to find peace? "What can I do?" I blurted out, a desperate plea escaping my lips. Miss Henderson's gaze met mine, her eyes filled with a strange mix of sympathy and trepidation. "There's an old ritual," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "A ceremony to appease restless spirits. But it's dangerous. It's best left undisturbed." The pounding from my apartment echoed in my mind, a grim reminder of the urgency of the situation. Fear warred with a newfound determination within me. "I have to try," I said, my voice hoarse but resolute. Miss Henderson hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Very well," she said, her voice laced with concern. "But be warned, child. This is a path you shouldn't tread lightly." She then proceeded to explain the ritual, a series of cryptic steps involving candles, herbs, and an offering of some sort. It sounded simple enough on paper, but the knowledge that I was potentially tampering with forces beyond my comprehension sent shivers down my spine. Leaving the library, I clutched the handwritten instructions in my sweaty palm. Tonight, I wouldn't be running from the darkness anymore. Tonight, I would confront it, head on. Whether I would succeed in helping the Wrights find peace or unleash something far more sinister remained to be seen. My apartment reeked of sage and rosemary, the pungent smoke curling around the flickering flames of 3 white candles. The handwritten instructions Ms. Henderson provided were spread out on the coffee table, a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. The knocking had stopped, an unsettling silence that seemed to press down on me with a suffocating weight. Had the spirits retreated, sensing my preparations? Or were they simply waiting, gathering their strength for a final confrontation? Taking a deep breath, I reached for the small wooden box Miss Henderson had procured for me. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a single, withered rose, a symbol of lost innocence, a token of empathy for the trapped family. The ritual instructions were cryptic, a series of whispers translated from a forgotten language. I chanted them haltingly, my voice trembling slightly in the flickering candlelight. With each word, the air grew heavier, charged with an unseen energy. As I recited the final verse, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles with a hiss. The sudden darkness plunged me into a primal fear, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Who dares disturb our slumber?" A voice rasped from the corner of the room. It wasn't the desperate pleas of before. It was a guttural growl, laced with anger and a dark, menacing power. Panic threatened to consume me, but I forced myself to remain still, to hold on to the sliver of hope that remained. Clutching the rose tightly, I placed it on the floorboards where the knocking had been most frequent. "We offer this as a token of peace," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "We mean you no harm. Please, find your way to the light." Silence. The thick, oppressive air hung heavy in the darkness. I strained to hear any sound, any indication of what, if anything, was happening on the other side of the veil. Then, a faint whisper, almost inaudible in the stillness. "Thank you." It breathed, filled with a melancholic longing. A faint light flickered on the periphery of my vision, growing brighter until it illuminated a single, withered rose petal glowing with an ethereal light. The light slowly faded, leaving behind a sense of profound peace. The oppressive weight that had settled upon me lifted, replaced by a strange sense of calm. Tears well up in my eyes, a mixture of relief and sorrow. Slowly, dawn painted the sky with streaks of orange and pink, casting a gentle light into the room. The air felt clean, devoid of the oppressive presence that had haunted me for so long. The silence, once terrifying, was now a welcome embrace. The ordeal had taken its toll. My body trembled with exhaustion, but there was a lightness in my spirit that hadn't been there in years. Maybe the Wrights had finally found peace, and maybe, just maybe, so had I. Sleep finally came, deep and dreamless. Sunlight streamed through the window when I woke, painting warm stripes across the dusty floorboards. The oppressive feeling of being watched was gone, replaced by a sense of quiet hope. The apartment looked different in the morning light. The shadows that once held menacing shapes now seemed more benign, the creaks and groans less ominous. A tentative smile touched my lips. Maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was truly over. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the notification sound jarring in the newfound tranquility. It was a message from Emily. "Hey, been meaning to ask. Everything all right with the knocking? Haven't heard a peep in days." Relief washed over me. "Everything's fine," I typed back, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Must have been the old pipes acting up again. The day unfolded in a blur of normality. Work, errands, the usual routines that had seemed so mundane just days ago now felt like a luxury. As evening approached, I hesitated before stepping into my apartment. Would the peace last, or was this just a temporary reprieve? Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door. The air inside felt lighter, devoid of the heavy energy that had clung to it for so long. The silence was no longer unsettling but peaceful. A small part of me, however, remained wary. Just then, a soft rapping sound caught my attention. A single hesitant tap against the wall, vaguely audible. My heart lurched, the echo of past terror sending shivers down my spine. But this wasn't the frantic pounding of before. This was different. Tentative, almost grateful. Slowly, I approached the wall, my breath catching in my throat. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely above a murmur. A soft sigh echoed from behind the wall, followed by a faint whisper that brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," it breathed, the voice filled with a profound sadness and a hint of something else. Gratitude. I stood there for a long moment, a lump forming in my throat. The rights might be gone, moved on to whatever lay beyond. But a part of them, a sliver of their essence, remained, a faint echo in the walls, a reminder of the restless souls I had helped find peace. The single tap on the wall wasn't a threat, but a final farewell, a whisper of thanks from the other side. As the silence settled once more, this time a welcome guest, I knew that in this quiet apartment, a small piece of history had been laid to rest. Weeks turned into months, and the unsettling silence in my apartment became a comforting constant. The faint tapping, the chilling whispers, they were a distant memory, replaced by the comforting hum of my refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old building settling. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, although a part of me remained unsettled. The experience had left an indelible mark, a haunting reminder of the unseen forces that sometimes brush against the fabric of our reality. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in the attic, a dusty photo album caught my eye. Its faded leather cover crackled in my hands as I opened it. Inside, a collection of black and white photographs offered a glimpse into the past residents of Elmwood Apartments. Smiling faces stared back at me. Families on picnics, children playing, couples embracing. Then, on a worn, yellowed page, I saw it. A young couple, beaming brightly at the camera. The woman, with kind eyes and a gentle smile, bore a striking resemblance to the faded photograph of Old-Timer from the forum. The caption below simply read, "Thomas and Amelia Wright, 1952. A jolt of realization hit me. Old-Timer wasn't some ghost from the past. It was a descendant, a living relative of the trapped souls I'd helped. Grief, I realized, had manifested in a way I hadn't entirely understood. Immediately, I sat down and typed a message on the forum, a hesitant plea for contact. Minutes turned into hours, and just as I was about to resign myself to silence, a notification popped up. "It's you," the message read, simple and direct. "Thank you." A wave of relief washed over me. The Wrights were finally at peace, and an old-timer, their descendant, was finally able to find closure. We exchanged a few more messages, shading stories and offering words of solace. A few days later, a package arrived on my doorstep. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a beautiful silver locket. A note attached read, "A token of gratitude. Never forget the kindness you showed to those lost in the shadows." I held the locket close, the metal cool against my skin. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of the connection I had forged with the unseen world, a reminder that the lines between reality and the spirit realm can sometimes blur. As I placed the locket around my neck, a newfound sense of purpose bloomed within me. The experience at Elmwood Apartments had changed me. It had opened my eyes to the unseen forces that sometimes linger around us, and it had ignited a curiosity about the mysteries that lie beyond the veil. Maybe, I thought, there were other stories waiting to be heard, other restless souls in need of help. And maybe, just maybe, I was the one who could help them find peace. The future stretched before me, a mystery waiting to be unraveled, and for the first time in a long time, a thrill of anticipation danced in my chest. Rain lashed against the window panes, a relentless rhythm that mirrored the tremor in my hands. The flickering light of the antique gas lamp cast long, distorted shadows across the dusty bookstore, each creak of the floorboards sending a shiver down my spine. In my hand, I clutched a dog-eared copy of Haunts of the Heartland, its yellowed pages filled with tales of local folklore and unexplained phenomena. My search for Old-Timer had led me here, to this hidden gem tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. The proprietor, a wizened old man with eyes that held a lifetime of stories, sat behind a cluttered counter, his gaze fixed on a crossword puzzle. With a deep breath, I approached him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm looking for someone, a forum member by the name of Old-Timer." The man's gaze snapped up, his eyes locking with mine. A flicker of recognition crossed his face before he settled into a studied neutrality. "Can't say I'm familiar with any Old-Timers," he mumbled, his voice raspy. They used to frequent a forum about local history and mysteries." I pressed, my voice gaining strength. "Specifically, anything related to the Elmwood Apartments fire." The man's gaze narrowed, a flicker of something akin to fear crossing his face. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "Those things, best left undisturbed." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the confirmation I was searching for. "But they helped me," I insisted, placing the photocopied newspaper article about the fire on the counter. "The Wrights. I helped them find peace." The man studied the article for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then, with a sigh, he beckoned me closer. "There are whispers," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Old-Timer wasn't a username. It was a title passed down through generations, a guardian of sorts. "A guardian," I repeated, my curiosity piqued. "They say the fire, it wasn't an accident." The man continued, his voice laced with a hint of reverence. Something dark, came through the open door. The Wrights, they trapped it, at a terrible cost." My mind raced. The cryptic message about an open door from Ms. Henderson suddenly made sense. And Old-Timer, they were keeping it contained. The man nodded grimly. "They watched, they listened, always vigilant. But with you, with your help, the Wrights found peace. Now, the burden falls to you." A wave of terror washed over me. Me, a guardian against unseen forces. It was a responsibility I never asked for, one that filled me with dread. But then I looked at the locket around my neck, a constant reminder of the gratitude and the peace I had helped bring. Maybe, I thought, facing the unknown wasn't so bad after all. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse but resolute. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'll do my best." The man gave me a curt nod, his expression unreadable. As I stepped back into the rain-soaked night, the weight of the responsibility settled upon my shoulders. The Elmwood Apartments chapter might be closed, but a new one, far more daunting, had just begun. The dusty bookstore faded into a distant memory as I navigated the bustling city streets. The weight of the revelation hung heavy on me. Guardian. The word itself conjured images of stoic warriors locked in eternal battles against mythical creatures. Me, a bookstore regular with a penchant for ghost stories. Reality, however, rarely adhered to the fantastical. My weaponry consisted of a well-worn copy of Haunts of the Heartland and a newfound sense of purpose, albeit a terrifying one. The first few weeks were a blur of research and nervous anticipation. I devoured every scrap of information I could find on local folklore and paranormal activity, my apartment becoming a makeshift war room overflowing with books, articles, and cryptic notes. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes, sent shivers down my spine. The once peaceful silence of my apartment now felt like a ticking time bomb, a constant reminder of the darkness that potentially lurked just beyond the veil. One particularly restless night, as I hunched over a book on warding rituals, a faint scratching sound reached my ears. It wasn't the familiar creaking of the building, but a deliberate, rhythmic scraping sound coming from behind the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs as I inched closer, the worn copy of Haunts of the Heartland clutched tightly in my sweaty hand. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, punctuated by muffled thumps. Panic threatened to consume me, but the image of the locket around my neck, a symbol of the peace I'd helped bring, spurred me on. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I approached the bookshelf that stood against the wall where the sounds originated. It was an old, heavy piece of furniture, a fixture in the apartment since I moved in. "Who's there?" I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. The scratching stopped abruptly, followed by a chilling silence. My hand trembled as I reached out and touched the cool wood of the bookshelf. "If you need help," I continued, my voice gaining strength despite the fear gnawing at my insides, "there's another way. A way to find peace." Silence. Just when I thought my words had fallen on deaf ears, a faint sigh echoed from behind the wall. "Lost," a voice rasped, barely audible. "Lost and alone." The voice wasn't menacing, but filled with a profound sadness that tugged at my heartstrings. This wasn't a malevolent entity, but a lost soul yearning for solace. "You're not alone," I said, my voice firmer now. "There's a way you can move on." With newfound confidence, I spent the hours that followed reciting a passage from the book on peaceful transitions, the words offering a beacon of hope in the darkness. As dawn painted the sky with streaks of orange and pink, the scratching sound ceased entirely. An exhausted but strangely optimistic feeling settled over me. Maybe, just maybe, I had helped another lost soul find peace. Maybe this was what it meant to be a guardian. The road ahead was undoubtedly fraught with danger and the unknown, but fear was no longer the sole occupant of my heart. A spark of courage, ignited by empathy and a newfound purpose, flickered within me. And as I stepped out into the city streets, the rising sun casting a warm glow on my face, I knew that whatever darkness lurked in the shadows, I wouldn't face it alone. Sleep came easily that night, a deep, dreamless slumber that left me feeling refreshed and surprisingly optimistic. The encounter with Sarah had solidified my purpose. I was no longer just a bookstore regular with a penchant for ghost stories. I was a guardian, a protector against the unseen forces that threatened the fragile balance between our world and the next. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. News of Sarah's experience, embellished and distorted as these things often were, spread through the apartment building like wildfire. Soon, I found myself fielding a constant stream of requests, flickering lights, unexplained noises, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Most cases were mundane, easily explained by faulty wiring or overactive imaginations. But a few sent shivers down my spine. There was the old woman on the third floor who swore she saw shadowy figures flitting through the hallways at night, and the young couple on the first floor who claimed their pet cat would hiss and cower at an empty corner of their living room. These were the cases that tested my newfound courage. Armed with my trusty book of rituals, a growing collection of herbs and crystals, acquired from a surprisingly helpful occult shop downtown, and a healthy dose of skepticism, I tackled each case head-on. One particularly unsettling evening, I found myself at the doorstep of Mr. Garcia, a gruff widower who lived alone in a cluttered apartment on the 5th floor. For weeks he'd reported hearing disembodied whispers in his sleep, a voice that called his name in the dead of night. The apartment was steeped in an oppressive silence, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of stale tobacco. Mr. Garcia, a wiry man with eyes that held a lifetime of stories, paced nervously as I explained my presence. "I don't believe in this spook stuff," he mumbled, his voice gruff. "But those whispers, they drive a man crazy." Following my intuition, I performed a cleansing ritual, the sage smoke curling around the dusty furniture as I chanted words of purification. As I finished, Mr. Garcia let out a long sigh, a flicker of relief crossing his weathered face. "For the first time in weeks," he said, his voice softer now, "it feels quiet." We sat and talked for a while, Mr. Garcia sharing stories of his late wife, their laughter echoing through the once oppressive apartment. As I stepped out into the hallway, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Sometimes all it took was a listening ear and a little human connection to banish the shadows. The following morning, Mr. Garcia greeted me with a warm smile and a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You brought back the light, not just in my apartment, but in my heart." Walking away from the apartment building that day, the weight of the responsibility felt lighter somehow. Being a guardian wasn't just about battling malevolent entities. It was about bringing solace to the lonely, dispelling fear with knowledge and empathy. The whispers in the darkness might never truly cease, but I, the accidental guardian, would be there to listen, to help, and to remind everyone that even in the face of the unknown, the light of hope could always prevail. Months blurred into a year, and the once terrifying apartment became a sanctuary, a place where the veil between worlds seemed a little thinner than most. The scratching sounds never returned, replaced by an unsettling quiet that hummed with a strange energy. I learned to navigate this new reality, a guardian armed not with weapons, but with knowledge, empathy, and a growing sense of responsibility. One rainy afternoon, a frantic knock shattered the usual quietude. It wasn't the tentative tapping I'd become accustomed to, but a relentless pounding that echoed a chilling familiarity. My heart hammered against my ribs as I rushed to the door, the worn copy of Haunts of the Heartland clutched tightly in my hand. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a young woman, her face a mask of terror, rain plastering her hair to her forehead. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door. "Help me," she gasped, her voice laced with desperation. "There's something in my apartment. It won't let me leave." The woman's frantic words sent a jolt of fear through me. This wasn't a lost soul seeking solace. It was something far more sinister. But the terror in her eyes mirrored the helplessness I'd once felt, and I knew I couldn't turn her away. "Calm down," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Tell me what happened." The woman, introducing herself as Sarah, explained how strange occurrences had plagued her apartment for weeks. Flickering lights, disembodied voices, and an oppressive feeling that choked the air. The final straw came that morning, when an unseen force slammed the door shut, trapping her inside. My stomach churned. The symptoms Sarah described bore an unsettling resemblance to the early days of my own experience at Elmwood Apartments. This wasn't just a rogue spirit. It was a malevolent entity, intent on trapping its victim. "Don't worry, Sarah," I said, forcing a reassuring smile. "We'll get you out of there." Armed with a backpack filled with sage, salt, and a few well-worn pages from my book of rituals, we ventured out into the rain-soaked city. The oppressive feeling intensified as we approached Sarah's apartment building, a sense of dread pressing down on me with each step. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to try," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "This thing feeds on fear. We won't give it that satisfaction." Taking a deep breath, I followed Sarah to her apartment, the pounding of my own heart a drumbeat against the silence of the hallway. The moment we stepped inside, the air grew thick and heavy, the flickering lights casting grotesque shadows on the walls. "Stay behind me," I instructed Sarah, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. Following the ritual instructions from the book, I began to cleanse the apartment, the pungent smoke of sage swirling through the stagnant air. As I chanted the words, the unseen entity lashed out, throwing objects around the room with an unseen force. Fear threatened to consume me, but the image of Sarah's terrified face spurred me on. Focusing all my energy, I recited the final verse of the banishment ritual, a wave of power coursing through me as the words left my lips. A deafening silence followed, broken only by the sound of our ragged breaths. Tentatively, I switched on the lights. The room was still. The objects that were tossed lay scattered on the floor, but the oppressive feeling had lifted. Relief washed over me, warm and welcome. Sarah let out a shaky sob, rushing towards me and engulfing me in a hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me." As we walked away from the apartment building, a sense of accomplishment filled me. Being a guardian wasn't just about helping lost souls find peace. It was about protecting the living from the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil. The rain had stopped, the setting sun casting a golden glow on the city streets. As I looked up at the sky, a single star emerged from the twilight, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear, but a quiet confidence. The road ahead might be filled with challenges, but I wouldn't face them alone. The weight of the responsibility felt lighter now, a badge of honor I wore with pride. The line between reality and the spirit world might be blurry, but I, the accidental guardian, was here to stand watch.